Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a wonderful evening. Secrets of Baker Street, the curious adventures of the real Holmes and Watson. We have the author here tonight, Perry Wyatt, all the way from very sunny Swansea. My name's Steve Emmets. I'm the founder of Emmets Publishing and Orange Pip Books. We're going to have a live reading from Secrets of Baker Street and an author Q&A. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to Emmets and to Orange Pip. So Emmets Publishing was founded in 2006, and we are the largest Sherlock Holmes publisher in the world, pretty much by any kind of way you would like to measure it. We have over 150 authors. We have over 500 books out there, and we've sold over 2 million units around the world in loads of different formats, print, ebooks, audiobooks, and now some art and some merchandise as well. Orange Pip's Books was founded in 2019 with a view to bring Sherlock Holmes to a wider audience, an alternative to traditional stories with a particular focus on LGBTQ plus and BAME characters, which of course weren't around in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's time, didn't really feature in the original canon. So in the original 56 short stories and 4 novellas were very traditional with a very narrow set of characters. So Orange Pip was brought into being as a brainchild of the lovely Nico Vaughan, who's also online tonight, to really give the opportunity to bring stories and particularly new characters. Last month, we had a wonderful author Q&A with Alyssa Walkington, whose book Ghost at the Window brings a wonderful young female character in at the center of her stories. So here are some of the books launched by Orange Pip in the last 18 months. So you've got Ghost at the Window, which I mentioned. You've also got Wiggins, Son of Sherlock. It's a Canadian writer, Dorothy Palmer, and it's first major character with a disability. We also have penned by Nico and illustrated by a wonderful illustrator, Violet, and the Agents of Hive, so a wonderful graphic novel, and some other titles as well. So a little bit about MX. We're a social enterprise. We have 3 major causes that we support around the world. Stepping Stone School in the UK, Happy Life Children's Home in Kenya, and the United Nations World Food Programme. A little bit about Stepping Stone School. It's a school for children with severe learning disabilities, and we've been working with them since about 2009. And I've been a patron of the school since 2016. We've raised nearly 100,000 now dollars for the school to fund particular projects there. We've done loads of events, even done some Sherlock Holmes theatre. Now, you're wondering what's the link with Sherlock Holmes? Well, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually used to live there. So that amazing building that you can see on the screen there, the older part of it, that was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's home at the turn of the century. He had actually a hand in designing the home. He actually wrote Hound of the Baskervilles and a number of other stories there. If you get a chance to go and visit, it's in Hazelmere in Surrey. It's well worth going down there. It's absolutely stunning. And you can actually sit at Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's desk. And we encourage all the budding writers out there. It's a wonderful way to write the first line of your next book, or your first book, indeed, sitting at Sir Arthur's desk. Close to both my wife Sharon and our hearts is Happy Life Children's Home. It's a baby rescue project in Nairobi in Kenya, and we've been working with them since 2012. We're both mentors, and every Christmas, apart from under COVID, we've spent at Happy Life with the kids. So sometimes when people say, how many kids have you got? We say, well, for 50 weeks of the year, we don't have any, but for 2 weeks of the year, we have about 150. We've run events, we do some awareness, and we work on a lot of projects with them. COVID has actually pushed us to do really raise the bar in terms of what we've been doing. So in 2020, we created a project called Books to Trees. So for every book that we sold on our website, we planted a tree at Happy Life. We actually had to stop the project when we got to around about August time because we'd actually funded the entire tree planting project there, 1,000 trees. So we switched our attention to school books. So during 2021, and it's still ongoing, a percentage of all of our sales that we do on our website go to provide school books for the Happy Life schools there in Kenya. And finally, the United Nations World Food Programme. We've been working with their Innovation Accelerator since 2017. So I'm a tech mentor. So usually this involves 3 or 4 times a year going over and working with the innovation teams in Munich, in Germany. Obviously, under the pandemic, it's been done virtually. Get involved in boot camps, and we also been involved in some really cool mentoring projects as well. And we're very proud to have been part of the team that won the Nobel Peace Prize last year for the work trying to solve world hunger. So on to the subject of the evening tonight, Perry Wyatt. So Secrets of Baker Street, the Curious Adventures of the Real Holmes and Watson. As you can probably tell from the blurb that you will have read before you came tonight, I love this phrase, behind every great man is a woman with a very convincing moustache. I'm not going to say too much more because I think now's a good time to stop sharing the slides and get Perry back on camera. And we will go in and kick off with a quick hello, and then we'll try and go to a reading. So the technology works. We'll get Perry back on camera.
Hello, this is yeah, cool, nice. Hi.
There we go. Hi, Perry.
Hi, you all right?
Yeah, so, we joked a little bit about sunny Swansea, but I can see you're actually illuminated there through the window.
I'm like, Swansea is like our neighbour, but I'm actually from Cardiff, so like just next door. You're very close, but like, yeah, they're just neighbours. But yeah, so it's actually pretty nice here at the moment. It's melting at work today, so I think we're all good on that front. Yeah, honestly, weather's been good.
Fantastic. And yeah, you were telling us before the recording started that you've tidied up a little bit for tonight.
Nico was joking about it, but I swear this is tidy. This is my tidy room. If you've seen it yesterday, there was everything everywhere. I do a lot of I have a load of books I've just chucked out in the hallway for this particular reading, and I will go retrieve them afterwards. But yeah, honestly, this is nice and tidy. I do collect postcards, so that explains that wall. So yeah, so it's kind of like collect books and postcards.
Yeah, we can see probably 30 or 40 postcards over your left shoulder there. So we'll come back to that. We'll ask you about those a bit later. So if we're going to kick off with a quick reading, what part do you want to do?
I was hoping to just go from the beginning. So I know a bunch of my friends who are not currently they're not in Cardiff. They haven't yet got the book, so because you can grab it on the website now. But so just to I know that my aunt might be here as well, so I think she'd appreciate me reading from the beginning rather than just joining in the middle. Yeah, so if that's all right, can I go from the beginning?
That's perfectly okay. I would say 9 out of 10 authors start at the beginning. So over to you.
It's a very good place to start. Okay, so Secrets of Baker Street, the Curious Adventures of the Real Holmes and Watson. So this one is called The Rooms at 221B Baker Street. It was clear to me from a young age I could not accomplish all I wanted to with the gender assigned to me at birth. My father reportedly wept when my dear mother brandished a girl from the theatre at Chelmsford Hospital. In my later years, I concluded that the wave of emotion was bitter disappointment. Of course, when my brother Harris appeared the following year, my father forgave my impudence for being born female, and I was sent away to finishing school. Looking out onto the hotel's dining hall on the Strand, I pondered my father and wondered what he would think of me now. I had not turned out the way he had longed for me to. There was no graceful married lady here. The only thing my mother and I shared were our fair hair and full lips. The dining space was filled with couples in their morning attire, ladies dressed in their embroidered petticoats that were buttoned up to their chins to help them cope with the September weather. I shivered at the thought of being tied in one of those contraptions that were women's corsets, as I had been at school. Naturally, I loathed being sent away, and found such tasks as embroidery, fan waving, and learning to keep house to be menial activities. I lived in books. I stuck myself into classes in biology, physics, and chemistry, and studied relentlessly. The butlers had noticed my usual morning lateness and had prepared me a table by the window. I was presented with a pot of tea and a jug of milk whilst my breakfast was being prepared. My brother had written to me about how Americans had curious sugar treats for their morning meal. The thought of him brought a pang to my chest as I realized how much I missed him. My brother had indulged my curious, studious mind and brought me books from his college where he had been studying the medical sciences from a young age. We often spoke in jest about swapping roles, much to my father's chagrin. Father was determined to keep my brother in the family business of becoming a doctor like him. Everything was set and ready. I was to conclude my studies at finishing school in Winchester, and my brother was to become a doctor. However, the only thing dear Harris loathed more than my father was studying. My loveliest, loneliest sister, he declared one morning as he came into my suite in our family house in Chelmsford. How does a flower like you thrive in the world of education? I had crossed my legs under my dress and had a physiology book open in my lap. My notes were fanned out all around me in the moleskin notebooks I kept in prim condition. One cannot be bored when there's so much to be learned, I replied, gesturing for him to leave so I could enjoy the engagement of academia once more. You should be joyous, for you're blessed with the freedom of masculinity. Harris leaned against the door frame and crossed his arms. His green eyes were His green eyes were bright and full of mischief on his fat tanned face. Our father was providing terror with every domestic visit on his round, no doubt. I shut the book, for I knew, since we had had the house to ourselves, a plot must be afoot. That day, my brother and I struck a deal. He would write to the finishing school on my father's behalf, as he frequently kept the surgery's correspondences and knew his hand, informing them of an illness that was preventing me to study there. I would instead fill my brother's position at his school, posing as John Watson, his younger brother. With a neat forgery for my brother, complete with the assurance of my father's continuous donations to Bartholomew's Hospital in London, I was all set. My brother decided that with his newfound freedom, he would go and visit our aunt in New York. She was a flamboyant widow in need of an heir. Harris was confident that he would be able to win her over. After all, our mother's sister had a soft spot for the lonely lambs of England. My father's declining health meant that he no longer travelled and had nurses in residence as I started my practice in St. Bartholomew's. I learned quickly how to cover my female visage with stage makeup and male clothing. Both I found rather liberating, especially the absence of a corset. My father passed away as I started university in London. I knew he thought me a disappointment, thus the loss didn't ail me as perhaps it should have. I did not attend the funeral either, despite paying for it. I had made peace with his death long before it had happened. My brother divided the inheritance among us from his new home in New York, and I was blessed with considerable income to fund my studies. I lived a secret life in London as John, Joanna making an appearance only in the most private of events spent alone until I graduated in 1874. I joined the army as a result of some friends of mine signing up to offer their services to the Queen and country. However, I was injured on my first tour, struck with eccentric fever, and returned home. With my nerves shaken beyond imagination, my only desire was to do nothing but sleep. I had taken up residence in a hotel on the Strand, while I decided what my next move should be. I could return to my practice. Maybe I could travel. Perhaps London was not to be my place anymore. Truthfully, my fingers itched to be back with my patients, but maybe my gifts had been retired too long and I might have lost my skills. Thought waned on my mind. Nothing seemed like the correct move for me anymore. I found myself staring at the teapot. A familiar voice pulled me from the bleakness of my thoughts. "Dear God, Watson, is that you?" came from the table opposite. I looked up and saw dear old Stamford, a friend of mine from St. Bartholomew's. I smiled wildly. It never failed to amuse me that so many of my closest friends and allies believed I was born a brother and not a sister. "Stamford," I exclaimed. He came over at once. Goodness, Watson, thin as a reed. Are you well, man? I gestured to the seat in front of me, and he sat down, resting a mahogany-topped cane on the arm of the seat. Quite well, I said, folding the broadsheet back up and resting it on the side of the table. How are you faring? I heard you moved up from being a dresser at the hospital, I replied. I had lost weight since my time on the front, although it seemed the least of my worries. My companions all had jobs and a means of moving forward. Many spread out over fair England, and some even residing further afield in the beauty of Wales or the hills of Scotland. The times has not been kind to men of our profession, Watson, he said, a wary smile on his round face. His hair seemed to have been shrinking back to his ears, and as it did for men of a certain age. I was fortunate. Baldness in women was not common. He asked the serving gentleman for a pot of tea of his own as my bacon and eggs and porridge arrived. I may have been promoted in my profession, but the days are long and tiresome, Watson, he said with a sigh. I remembered him being distinctly smitten with the pastime of complaining. I let my mind drift as he told me of the newfound roses' blossoming career. I had no qualms with him, yet I found that my worries must have furrowed my brow. Stamford halted his tirade. Thankfully, he had not got on to the subject of his wife yet. A dear thing she was too. Your countenance has fallen, John, he remarked, looking at me with close brown eyes and sticking out his chin. He rubbed his stubbled jaw where he kept a trimmed beard and buoyant moustache. Enough about me. Tell me what is bothering you so. I finished off my breakfast and shook my head briskly. Nothing is amiss, Stamford, I replied. Only worries that will melt as soon as I have solved their problems. I swept the broadsheet I had originally prepared to be my company off the table. You are lucky to have crossed my path today, I followed as he sipped his tea. I shall not be staying here much longer. Stamford swallowed as he placed the cup on the saucer once more. I am looking for rooms in London, but I have not found much that is not by any means agreeable. Ever since returning from service, I had wallowed in my rooms here on the Strand, living a comfortable existence on my 11 shillings a week, supplemented by the money I had remaining from my inheritance. However, I would need to be more frugal to continue to live here with basic comforts. I know of a man, Stamford said, resting his elbows on the table as he spoke animatedly. He is a unique sort of fellow, a researcher, I believe, an acquaintance that I met at the hospital. He has found some rooms in Baker Street, but was looking for a gent to share the space with so he could afford it. I knew Baker Street to be a great central locale, close to the station and the surrounding amenities. It sounded perfect. My reply was instant. That sounds most agreeable, I replied, tapping the table with my palm. I must meet this man at once. The sudden arrangement for my day gave me a rush that had been long forgotten by my system. Stamford regarded me strangely for a moment before nodding. I readied myself to leave by throwing my coat over my shoulders. Of course, he said, finishing his tea and doing the same. I must warn you, he added, talking with a lilted tone. He is an odd sort of man. I shrugged my shoulders. The men I served behind in the army surely could not pose a stranger mix of weird and worn. Perhaps we know him, I proposed, as he led the way to the door. Tell me his name. Stamford's reply was quick. Sherlock Holmes. I think that's a good place to stop. What do you think, Steve?
I think that's a fantastic place to stop.
Okay, cool beans. Nice.
Sherlock Holmes, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. You set the scene really well there. I think we can jump straight into some questions. Let's open up this question and answer window. So while I do that, anybody that's joined that hasn't told us where they're from, if you could tell us your city and country, that would be wonderful. We have 4 countries represented so far: Wales, England, Argentina, and the USA. But we may have some more. So and more people from Cardiff as well. There, Perry, have joined us. So welcome, Rian. So let's go to the Q&A window. First question comes from Lisa. What inspired you to write this book?
I've always kind of been obsessed with the idea of like secret women, if you excuse the expression. Mulan was one of my favorite Disney princesses and still is. So I like the idea of having kind of women in a place in history where women were kind of restrained, and they kind of had this really specific kind of societal role, before kind of gender became this kind of fluid spectrum that it is today. But so yeah, and then I kind of played with the idea of spies, and when I met Nico, I had this idea of having like 2 female spies, and then they kind of aligned up with Sherlock and Watson, and I was like, oh, actually, I hadn't thought about that. So I went back, did some more research, and I was like, oh, could this even work? And then I loved there was a Sherlock Holmes episode, once with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, where Molly, because she's obviously a lady and she's a doctor in the modern series, but there's a special one. It's not the Abominable Bride. It might be it is the Abominable Bride, but it's set back in time where Sherlock's having a trip, and it's like 19th century, and Molly's dressed up as a man. As like, it was super secret and totally against the law, but I loved it, and I became totally obsessed with the idea of it. Yeah, so I kind of thought I'd go off that and see how far it would take me. And I loved the short form that Doyle used in his work. So I loved the idea of doing kind of short fiction, but I've never been very good at it. So I had to do a lot of research before I kind of sat down and penned on my own. But yeah, so I wanted to take Sherlock, take Watson, make them ladies, and set them off on their own path. And that was like very clear to me from the beginning. Just kind of wanted to see what would happen. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to write it, because I wanted to see how far I could take it. I took it quite far. Made a book.
Yeah, fantastic. So Miranda's question is kind of similar. Why did you decide on the theme and the genre? So you picked the theme first, and then you went to the genre second, I guess.
Yeah, I think I picked the theme first, and then the genre being kind of like Victorian, historical, Sherlockian. Yeah, it came with territory. I kind of thought about bringing it to a modern perspective, but I've never written anything like that before. And once I kind of did a lot of research and knew where I stood with it all, I was kind of keen with sticking with like the historical kind of sphere of it. It was just somewhere nice to stay, So I think once I kind of knew where I was going with it, I did all the research, and then I think that was a good place to be, genre-wise. Yeah.
Well, there are a few female Watsons for sure, and some female Sherlocks as well. Elementary, of course, Lucy Liu as a female Watson, but then she's openly female, and then you have the Japanese adaptation where Holmes and Watson are both female. But there's been a secret Sherlock who was a woman, which was we actually published a book called My Dear Watson, and Sherlock Holmes is a woman in that. It actually was released in Japanese first. It won a major award in Japan, and then many years later, the author, who's actually an American author, and she had it translated back into English so that we could publish it.
Nice.
Which is very cool. But as far as I'm aware, this is the first Holmes and Watson secretly being female that I'm aware of.
I guess I just thought it kind of fit the best, given the like societal kind of like women wouldn't have been able to like put on trousers and dress up and go and solve some crime. We're too busy rearing some kids. Or like it was historically speaking, like women were very kind of tied to like a very specific kind of set of rules in society. If you didn't have a lot of money, even more so, definitely too busy doing needlepoint. And so I thought the best way to make them free would be, in fact, to put them in disguise, and I thought that just added a bit more fun to it as well, especially if it was just two kind of people who had the same idea crossing paths. I just thought it was pretty niche. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey for us in the last sort of 13, 14 years, seeing how people have adapted. We've got a series which I think is up to 6 books now, written by Barry Brown. They're the Mrs. Hudson of Baker Street series, where Holmes and Watson are men, but they're not actually the detective behind the men. So she uses them as her kind of patsies to the outside world. They're solving all these crimes and doing all these deductions, but really it's Mrs. Hudson doing it all in the background. But of course, again, with the same point that you're making, she couldn't be seen to be doing it in the Victorian era. She had to channel the results, if you like, through the men, which is very interesting. So Nico's got a great question, which is, has writing the stories fired up an interest in the original Conan Doyle works?
Oh, definitely. I've literally I've read literally almost all of them at this point. So I wanted to be I wanted to get the gist of who they were. Obviously, I kind of took them and kind of interpreted them in the way that I kind of saw them. But his original perspective is really kind of unique. I'd come across that kind of style of writing before. It's very not informal. It's very formal. It's very specific and to the point. And so I kind of Sorry, I've forgotten the point of the question. Sorry. But yeah, sorry. What was the question again?
That's okay. Don't worry. It was did it get the interest for you to go back and read Conan Doyle's stuff?
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it has. And since then, I have read a lot more kind of Victorian age work. So, and that includes like fantasy versions. So I've been reading Shades of Magic by Schwab, and other ones that are even like fantasy Victorian London, like The Nevers just came out on Sky, and that's I know that's not reading, but it's very interesting to kind of just see, because Victorian London, there's so many kind of pieces of it in fiction. So I really do not just mystery, but it definitely inspired me to kind of look back at all the work I've read that's been kind of set in that Victorian era. And yeah, I love a good bit of Doyle. I think whenever I'm doing my cosplay, I always stick an audiobook of his on, because it's something that you can just listen to, and it's just relaxing and interesting, and you want to go back and listen to it, you know?
And do you prefer the short stories, or do you like the novellas more? So
I prefer the short stories. Yeah, something that you can kind of take bite-sizedly, you know?
It is interesting how some writers can find it incredibly hard to do novel length Doyle style, because of course he didn't write full length novels. Hannah the Baskervilles was the longest one, and that's barely half what a modern novel would be in terms of length, because back then they simply wrote everything much shorter than we do now. But some people find the short stories very hard to write, because you're trying to nail set the plot up and nail the solution within a very few number of pages. So it's quite a tough thing to do for some people. How did you? Yeah. And I guess a question from me, are you a structured writer, or it all flows out? Do you plot it all out, map it all out, and then put the words in? How did it come about?
Because these were short stories, if I'm going to do like a big old prose piece, I usually start with kind of like, my idea of planning is like from the base up. So I get like the genre I'm going for, I get the theme I'm going for. So if it was something to do with what I'm currently writing, which is completely not related, just for example, for my other research, that's a supportive fantasy, so that's like the genre, and then like that's focusing on the found family as like a theme and things like that. So then that'll kind of go up like then they get the characters, which are like, so this work would be obviously John and Sherlock, and then that would be kind of like, and then from those characters you build them up individually, so like what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, things they like, things they don't like. But honestly, if they're like, my key to like remember Fran saying is, if you talk about them like they're real people, you're going to write about them like they're real people. I know that makes me sound proper, like, I know it sounds like a knob, but genuinely, it really helps because then you kind of treat them as you're planning it out. You've already got the character in your head, so you've already got like what they would do. It doesn't feel like you're in the driver's seat anymore. It feels like that character that's already full has now just kind of taken it and driven with it, you know. So for these short pieces, I kind of focused on, like, I've got like notes. I've got a little notebook knocking about here somewhere. Let's see if I can find it for you. There you are. My friend got me this one. See, there we are. This is my little notebook for them, and they've got my notes about them. So just like things like what they like, what they don't like, how they interacted in like modern society. Whenever I can't feel like I could film my characters, I always chuck them somewhere and see how they react. Because if they react in a way that I think, when I put them somewhere and they react, I can get like a grip of where they stand, you know. So it really helps with the short stories because I can kind of like give them like the problem and they fix the problem. So these set of stories that was 100%, here's a problem, you guys have got to fix it. If it was for a much longer thing, it would be like, here's a problem, this is the next problem, and then this is the next problem. So yeah, so for these smaller ones, it did require some planning, but a lot of it was kind of, I'm going to set you up, we're going to see where you go. And if I liked it, I kept it, and if I didn't like it, it went in the bin.
Excellent. And Debbie's got a great question. She sensed a bit of humour crawling in that section that you read. Is that a feature of it, or did Debbie imagine that?
No, that's a feature. I've been told in a lot of my writing that like I want it to be quite upbeat, unless the topic is super serious. Even then, I've written some pretty serious stuff in my time, and I've like it's been, even then I'm pretty upbeat about it. But no, genuinely, like, this isn't meant to be like a pretty hard read. It's meant to come out the other side and feel a little bit kind of, it's meant to be light, and I like light, and having a little bit of comedy in there, it does help. And like, to be honest with you, the pair of them are pretty comical by themselves.
And Jordan's asked a question: Is it a one-off? You dipping into Holmes? Are you going to touch other genres in short stories, or are you going to come back to these two characters?
I think I might come back to them. I really enjoyed doing the set of short stories. So if this goes down well, then I'll write some more. I have some other, like, well, not in the literal bin, but in the bin on my like computer that like when I was going through editing, I was like, I don't think you guys make the cut just yet. But yeah, I think the genre of like England in the Victorian era, I've definitely kind of fallen in love with it. I kind of I've been through a phase and back, I feel, because when is Cassandra Clare wrote the Clockwork Prince series, that was all set in Victorian England, and even though that's fantasy, even that portrayal of it, I absolutely fell in love with. So hopefully I'll come back to them, and even if it isn't in like book form, I'd love to do like a screenplay about them, because I think that it would be wonderful. Like, I'd love to see how they react in another situation where you can like visually see it rather than just imagine it, even though books are great.
And a question from Miranda. I think she's angling at, have you tried another genre and decided you didn't like it, and is it a least preferred genre to write in? So if somebody said, right, you got to do some horror, or you got to do some science fiction or whatever, is there anything that doesn't appeal to you?
Currently I was trying to write a horror, but the problem is I'm a massive baby. I cannot deal with horrors. Like, I can't watch them. I saw what was that one? Get Out. That was the only horror I've seen in the last, like, however old I am. 10 years. There we go. 10 years. 10 years is a good shout. I don't really watch horrors. So, but in order to like become better at something, I do think you have to have some kind of level of like grounding for it, you know? So I don't think I'd be very good at writing horrors. I don't think I'd be very good at writing thrillers. Like, they're two things I don't think I would be very good at writing. And everything else, I think it would be like a good kind of stepping stone. I love things I like at the moment. I love contemporary, I love historical fiction. Fantasy has always been a love of mine. Love a good bit of romance as well. But like, yeah, that's horror is one of those ones I've wanted to kind of practice and get to grips with. But currently, I'm not sure I'm good enough at the kind of genre to kind of go like get teeth in. There we are. I don't think I could take Sherlock and Watson to horror anyway. I mean, I could, but who knows?
You can definitely get some very dark Holmes. Tracy Revels, who actually teaches a class in Sherlock Holmes, which is quite cool. She wrote a series, the Shadow series, so Shadow Fall, Shadow Blood, and Shadow Wraith, and they're very dark. He's a warlock in that one, so it's quite fantasy kind of orientated. Erin's asked a question. You say it's the Curious Adventures, and we've mentioned the LGBTQ plus community. Does that mean there's any romance between Holmes and Watson, or does that give anything away?
That kind of gives stuff away. Be honest with you, before I read any of Doyle at all, I'd seen the Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman BBC adaptation, and upon watching that when I was younger, I'd always kind of interpreted that as, until Molly came along, they like, I don't know, it just always felt somewhat kind of more than they were kind of trying to sell for me. Anyway, and then upon like reading into it as well, I kind of wondered what would happen if they did just kind of, because they lived together for ages, and they had this kind of wonderful, unique relationship. So part of me was like, how could they not? And that's all I'm going to say. And if you want to read it, you can read it.
I guess that's one of the things you have to read the book to find out. So Lisa's got a good question, which is, have you ever considered collaborating with somebody else to write a book? This is pretty rare, I have to say. In over 500 books that we've done, we've only had one pairing where two writers write a book together. Writers and illustrators do it all the time, but Kieran McMullen and Dan Andriaco came together to write 3 novellas together, which is really interesting. But that's the only one I can think of. Is it something you'd think about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the wonderful thing about having more than one kind of novelist working on a piece, I think I was reading Holly Black and Cassandra Clare's, it was the Key series or something along those lines. They did this novel trilogy, and you could really tell, even though they kind of had their like styles entwined in there, it wasn't like one chapter this and one chapter that. You could tell the 2 people have worked on it, and there is something really refreshing about having not just one voice but 2, because like one person has like a really lyrical edge, and one person has like a really kind of informative, descriptive edge. And there is something wonderful about this kind of like 2 people coming together and making something really kind of new. So I definitely wouldn't rule it out. If you had the right story idea, I'd be 100% in. I think some of the best creative work has been collaborative, and as long as it's an idea I can get behind and characters I can love, then I'd be 100% in on it. I love the idea of collaborating with some other people, because that way, when you're going insane over characters, so are they. So,
Fantastic. And Catherine's asked a question: how does it feel to finally have a book in your hands as a physical thing?
Totally cried my eyes out. My grandma was like, "Why are you crying? It's a great thing." And I was like, "Because it's a book and it's mine." Yeah, no, it's pretty nuts, to be honest with you. I never kind of, I read a lot, and I love stories. I always have. But I didn't like come out of the womb and start reading. Reading was something I developed later into. But I was just like, yeah, I think it's pretty magical in a weird kind of, I know it sounds silly, but it's really strange. And I just hope people like it,
There's an old trick I used to do, but I wrote 2 novels, but sadly over 20 years ago now. I used to say over 10 years ago. Now it's over 20 years ago, and before the internet was around. And I used to go into bookstores and ask them, "Have you got this book by Steve MX?" And they would go on their little computer and, "Oh no, but we can get hold of it for you. We can get one. We can order it in it." Yeah. You should get 2 or 3 of them in for the shelf, because I don't need one right now. But you should get a few in for the shelf, because I hear he's very good. And then when you pay with your credit card, they read your name, and then the gig's up. They work it out. But I think it's always worth asking your local bookstore to put it on the shelf. Most of them do. So I think that's an interesting experience when you walk into a bookshop and see your book there for the first time.
What's funny is I went for an interview at Waterstones a couple of years ago, and I was like, I'm going to be an author. And the guy was like, sure you are.
You should go back in and show him it, and say, there you go, mate.
You're like, yeah.
There you go.
But no, I think it's just because I was definitely the youngest person there wanting a job at Waterstones. There was all these unsociable hours, but books, yeah, But no, I think I will actually if he still works there.
And Cara's question is: if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Just don't give up. Sometimes life can kind of get you down, and you're going to feel sad about because it kind of sometimes it feels like, as silly as it sounds, like the words are just too big, and you just kind of can't get them out, and then people kind of want to read them, and you feel a bit kind of shy about it. But it's okay. You just don't give up. You're going to get there. That's what I say to me.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a great outlet there in sort of fan fiction as well. We have a lot of writers that come to us sort of 3 or 4 years after they've written tons and tons of fan fiction online, and have sort of improved their writing. I think your writing improves when you write. It's like anything. It's like riding a bike. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Is one way to kind of look at it. We've probably got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Somebody's posted this as anonymous. It's not a question, but we just wanted to say Perry's besties, Olivia, Cara, and Rianne, are so proud of you.
Aww.
There you go. They're trying to get you to cry on camera. That's what it is. They're trying to get you.
It 100% is. It definitely is. My friend Cara's up in Scotland currently, and my other 2 besties. Well, one of them, I think she just finished work, and the other one is just live down the road, but she's had a very busy week, so we're letting her off. But yeah, I'm not crying on camera, but I will speak to you guys later. Yeah, they're the best. And there's one thing. In case you haven't got the book yet, I'll just tell you now. So you guys all got the dedication in my book, which says, to all the incredible, strong women in my life, thank you for giving me strength. And that means to all of you. So, love you guys.
Fantastic. Final question then from Lisa is, what's your next move? What are you going to do next?
Currently, I'm doing a PhD with Swansea Uni. That's pretty big. But other than that, my next fiction piece, hopefully, is going to be a big old portal fantasy to do with, it's not Sherlock Holmes based, I'm afraid, but it is kind of got a Victorian element in it, but it's set in that